Hello everyone, Silent here, and welcome back to another episode of Bugrock of the Week. Today we have one of the most important betas in recent Bedrock Edition history. This beta, 1.16.100.57, implements some of the biggest spawning and despawning changes we have ever seen on the Bedrock Edition, and I'm not exaggerating. Seriously, these changes are absolutely massive. They're going to allow for hundreds, if not millions, of different mob farm designs. Okay, that might be an exaggeration, but you get the idea. This is going to allow for so much different things. The mob spawning limit now scales with the simulation distance, so the higher your simulation distance, the more spawning spaces you have available, and the bigger and better mob farms you can design. Honestly, these changes are amazing, and I cannot wait to see what the community does with them. This is going to be a more technically inclined video, so if you're not prepared for that, then prepare! Get yourself some popcorn, and let's hop into it. Two little notes at the beginning of today's video. The red cursor of death is still around. This has been around for 3 betas now. Today, his name is Daryl. Say hi to Daryl, everybody. He's gonna be chilling with us in today's video. And because this has been around for 3 betas now, I guess it's just kind of here to stay. For all I know, it's probably a feature. Also, another thing that you should be aware of, Mojang has announced the 3 new mobs that we get to vote for this year at Minecon or Minecraft Alive or whatever you want to call their yearly event. It's a very confusing naming scheme at this point, kind of similar to the new Xbox. Anyway, if you don't know about those 3 mobs, I made a video on that. You can see it in the iCards and down below in the video. I would suggest watching it because it has basically all the information that we know about these 3 mobs. There have been some massive changes to the spawning algorithms and spawning mechanics on the Bedrock Edition of Minecraft. To give you a little refresher, the previous mechanics were mobs could spawn anywhere within a 44 block radius of the player, which is this little red sphere right here. And that was for all simulation distances. This is actually still true for the 4 chunk simulation distances. However, if you have a 6, 8, 10, or 12 chunk simulation distance, the spawning sphere will now scale with the simulation distance, just like the despawning sphere. So that is actually pretty amazing. We're gonna have to create ourselves a brand new world to actually test and demonstrate these mechanics, because this one just simply isn't gonna cut it anymore. 2 hours later. So let's go over what we got right here. Basically, these little outlines are the chunk grid measurements of the different simulation distances. So gold is 4 chunk simulation, emerald is 6, lapis is 8, diamond is 10, and netherite is 12. I would like to mention that this platform is so big that it doesn't even render in with 80 chunk simulation distance, which is what I'm currently using. So we're just gonna go speed over here so that this entire thing actually renders in. There we go. A very big platform. For some reason, none of this renders in world edit, so I can't make it nice and pretty, so we're just gonna kind of be stuck with this current, platform that we got here, but that's not the point. Anyway, as you can see, the central chunk is marked out with these redstone blocks, and we're going to be doing all of our tests from the corner of the chunk on these diamond blocks. That way, we can see if there's any issues. So when you see these spawning patterns, they're going to be off-center, and that's going to be accounting for the player being in the very far corner. There is just a couple of command blocks that we're going to be using to conduct our spawning test today for all of our different simulation distances. The first one is a command block just to tell all mobs to stay exactly put, not allowing them to move at all, which is a fairly important thing. That way we know exactly where they spawn at all times. The second command is simply going to be placing a orange wool block right underneath that mob. That way we can mark where they spawned, and we always know that is where they spawned. And then the next block is simply going to kill them, allowing more things to spawn in their place. So we're going to go ahead and stand around, do a bit of AFK for all of the different simulation ranges, and see what kind of spawning pattern we got for each of them. And super fast test mode commence. And here you can see the 4 chunk simulation distance results. As you can see, exactly the same as the previous updates. Nothing will spawn within 24 blocks of the player, and then everything instantly despawns and does not spawn beyond 44 blocks. So basically you have between 24 and 44 to actually build mob farms for the 4 chunk simulation distance. Please note that realms can only ever be on 4 chunk simulation distance. Oh yeah, as for these 2 random blocks right here, I think these are either wandering trader spawns or bat spawns. Moving on to simulation distance of 6 and above, as you can see, things get very, very interesting from here on out. Very, very good stuff. There's a whole lot to say about this, but first of all, you can see I've tested this very thoroughly. Every single one of those orange blocks is a mob spawn, most likely multiple. Furthermore, these little extra orange blocks on the outside edges, those are wandering traders. Apparently, they can spawn anywhere, and they don't care about any spawning rules, so that may or may not be a bug. Anyway, regardless, as you can see, neutral, hostile, passive mobs, they could spawn in a massive area around the player, anywhere from 24 to 128 blocks, with some minor exceptions. They can spawn in any chunk in the simulation distance, as long as that chunk is not touching the simulation edge, or the very edge of loaded chunks. So as you can see, this chunk here, that one, basically all these ones going around the edge, no hostile, passive, or neutral mobs will spawn in these zones. That's for a very good reason, and one of the main problems, and one of the main things that we've been working around when it comes to revamping the spawning and despawning system. We don't want mobs to spawn on like the very edge of the chunks, going into unloaded chunks, because of course then they would just like, you know, walk into unloaded chunks, build up into the masses. We also don't want them to spawn in these chunks and then the player move a block and then this become an unloaded chunk and then mobs get built up in that fashion. This system of mob spawning right here completely solves that problem, because as soon as the player moves one chunk over, then everything next to the simulation distance edge is going to get despawned. So basically, things can spawn right here on the edge, but as soon as they move into this chunk, then they're going to despawn. Really, really awesome system. Basically, the ultimate spawning system that you can get for Bedrock Edition. I'm a super huge fan of it. It's kind of unfortunate that it doesn't work for simulation distance of 4, but for 6, 8, 10, and 12, this is really as good as you're going to get for the Bedrock Edition. It's amazing. It gives you so much more opportunity to play with, and especially that 128 block cap going upwards and downwards, that's a really good touch as well. Moving on to the 8 chunk simulation distance, you can see that things are pretty similar to the 6 chunk. However, there's one additional rule for all these simulation distances moving upwards from here. As you can see, it's kind of not really the same as the 6 chunk simulation distance. That one goes all the way to the edges, whereas this one does not. There's this big old area right here and along this edge where there's just no mobs spawning. That is because there is one rule for the 8, 10, and 12 chunk simulation distances that now applies for mob spawning. Any chunks that are 96 blocks or further away from the player will not be able to spawn a mob. So you can see that's what this circle right here is marked out as. And of course, this still counts for the sim edge chunks, so this chunk right here is kind of within the 96 blocks from the player, but it's still on the edge of the simulation distance, so it's not going to spawn any mobs. It's a little bit funky. I'm not entirely sure why they implemented this one. And now for the 10 chunk simulation distance. As you can see, it is exactly the same as the 8 chunk simulation distance, but now you can really see that 96 block rule in effect, because there are so many more chunks around the edges here that could, in theory, have mob spawning, because they're not a sim edge chunk, but they got this 96 block rule in place, which is kind of an interesting thing. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Nothing at all different from the 8 chunk. Let's move over to the 12 chunk just to finish off of this test. And last and least, we have the 12 chunk simulation range, exactly the same as 10 and 8. And as you can see, that's pretty much all there is to it. Not a terrible much of interest with 12 chunk, exactly the same as 10, exactly the same as 8. overall, this new spawning system is amazing. It's really awesome. It's gonna make so many different types of mob farms possible that have not been possible for a very long time. That combined with the new despawn system, this is gonna make some seriously amazing stuff possible on the Bedrock Edition. It might just blow your pants off with the amount of gunpowder and other various drops that you can now get. It's seriously really cool. I cannot wait to see what the community does with these new spawning mechanics. Now that we've done all of our tests, let's go ahead and combine our data, compare and contrast to our heart's desire for all of the 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 chunk simulation distances. As you can see, there's not actually that much information to go through. So we have all of our different chunks, of course. We got our where do they spawn, how do they randomly despawn, and where do they instantly despawn. All of the most important things, of course. So for the 4 chunk simulation distance, of course, nothing has changed. They spawn from 24 to 44 blocks away. They randomly despawn from 34 to 44 with no damage in the last 30 seconds, and they instantly despawn past 44 blocks away from the player. Simulation distance of 6 is a little bit different. They'll spawn anywhere from 24 to 128 blocks from the player, but not in simulation edge chunks. They will randomly despawn anywhere from 34 to 128 blocks with no damage in the last 30 seconds, and they'll instantly despawn in sim edge chunks and anywhere past 128 blocks from the player. 8, 10, and 12 chunk simulation distances are all exactly the same in every single way. Mobs will spawn 24 to 128 blocks away from the player, but not in sim edge chunks or chunks further than 96 blocks away from the player. As for the random and instant despawning, all of that stuff is exactly the same as simulation distance of 6. So as you can see, a lot of the mechanics really are quite similar to one another, regardless of what simulation distance you are playing on. If you're a player that switches simulation distances a lot, I would recommend that you just go ahead and take a screenshot of this board right now. That way you just have this on hand for all of your different mob farm building, all of your different questions, and then you don't really need to refer back to this video all the time. But saying that, maybe you should just refer back to the video. That way you get to hear my lovely voice, and I get more views. Thank you very much to It's Rich Heart for helping out with today's video. A couple of days ago, they released one with all of their mob spawning testing and all of that good stuff. And of course, I like to do my own testing. As you can see, I've been here for 5 hours. However, all of their numbers and all of their testing and all that good stuff help me keep on track and make sure that I got everything as correct as can be with the Bedrock Edition. So thank you very much, Rich Chart, for being a lovely and upstanding and just good person in general. I much appreciate it. Like, he even offered to send me a world download with their testing and stuff. Incredibly convenient, seeing as how this world is corrupt, according to World Edit, so that's weird. There is still one thing that really needs to change with the mobs, and that is simply a visual thing. We need to be able to see mobs from much further distances. So for example, if you have a mob spawn right here, basically as far as they can from the player, or you know, really anywhere along this entire area, then you will not be able to see them from further than 64 blocks away. As you can see, all those guys, they're gonna unrender. They're not despawning. They're just unrendering. So if we're over here at the AFK spot, all of those mobs still exist in the world. They're still walking around. They're brand new, just spawned, but we have absolutely no way of actually seeing them. Not only does this make it kind of impractical, there's mobs and you can't see them, but also it makes it very difficult to test the despawning as well. These guys from spawn eggs and command blocks, etc., can't despawn, so it's kind of hard to test that way. So you have to have a natural spawn and then back far away from them, but then like, they just unrender, so it's kind of hard to test the despawning. Anyway, that's my little rant. It would be nice if we could actually see them. Let me know what you guys think about these new spawning and despawning changes down in the comment section. I am loving hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for the great comments on the recent videos. So let me know what you think about this new system. I think it's a really, really great system. I don't really see any flaws with it at the moment. It seems like it's really well thought out and well implemented as well. This is also going to pretty much completely revolutionize mob farms and mob farming on the Bedrock Edition, and it's been so long since we've had this much area to work with, and when we did have this much area, there was no despawning, so you didn't get any rates anyway. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Bugrock of the Week. Thank you so very much for watching. I do hope that you have enjoyed. Of course, if you have, make sure to leave a like on the video. It helps out the video and the channel a ton. Thank you very much for doing that. If you're new here, then consider subscribing so you don't miss more episodes like this in the future. And otherwise, I'll see you guys down in the comment section and in the next one. Thank you again for watching, and then there was silence.